Once again, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining for the session of Azure Power Lunch. Um, as you know, we record these calls when we place our recordings on our YouTube channel. So if you don't want to be recorded, you may want to drop off now. And this call is joined by our Microsoft team members as well as our customers and partners. And if request that if somebody is joining, please let them in. If I'm not able to get to the team screen. Thank you. So with that, here is our topic of discussion. It is Data API Builder. Before we get into the um, actual what this service is, let's talk a few minutes why we need, what is the use case for that. So normally in a traditional application, you have your database backend. That can be SQL, that can be Cosmos DB. Then you have an API that is sitting on top of it that is providing you um, subset of this data for your application. And you may have multiple application, and in that case, you may have multiple um, APIs as well. And then you have the front end. And normally the API code is something that kind of you have to write in a sense that it is just providing access to your data. It's kind of have a security layer definitely on top of it. That's the problem, or that's the area that um, Data API Builder is trying to address. So what it does is provide you a way through configuration, the ability to access your database from a front end. So put simply, what and here is the kind of a quick diagram architecture. What it is it's a hosting platform plus a policy engine which allows you to expose your data either through REST or GraphQL to the external application. That's the goal of this thing, the Data API Builder. And once again, the Data API Builder, you can run it in a container locally. You can run it in a container on AKS or Azure Container Apps, or you can run it in a third-party platform or on-premise. Doesn't matter. So it is platform independent. It's an open source project. So at this moment, it is an open source project that is available um, for you to consume. And one other thing that I want to mention, that it is works with multiple relational databases, mostly popular like Azure MySQL, um, SQL Server, things like that. And just to mention one key point, I'm sure you heard about static web apps and static web apps data connection. So static web apps, what they do is it allows you to create web apps which like a single page application like Vue, um, or so you can create or React, these kind of frameworks. And when you run these applications in Azure, like Azure Static Web Apps, and you create data connection, basically the engine behind it is the data API builder. So that's the kind of the mechanism that is running behind the scenes. So it's already, I mean, if you just have used static web apps with data connection, you have already used data API builder. So that's kind of the abstraction behind it that exposes the endpoint, the data with either REST or GraphQL endpoints. Okay, and you can do everything with configuration. You don't have to write a single line of code, and we will take a look at that. Okay, and then we have some of the feature. First of all, I want to mention it supports GraphQL and REST, supports tables, views, and stored procedures. And if you are using Cosmos DB, it supports collections as well. Okay, it supports authentications with JWT. So auth to or JWT, it supports that. And if you're running in Azure, it supports easy auth. You can use role-based authentication with receive claim, and with that, you can enforce row level, filtering and authentication. supports OpenAI. And in regards to REST, it does support what we call OData. So you can do filtering, sorting, pagination. And if we go back to GraphQL, in regards to GraphQL, it supports mutations, queries, the whole shebang. And I already mentioned it that it works. It is when you are doing database connection feature of static web apps running in Azure, you are basically using this API data builder behind the scene. Any questions? Okay, so without that, further ado, let's go get into some demos. So first demo that I'm gonna do, and today's demo, I'm gonna be running everything locally just to give you an idea how this thing works. And we are gonna start with a simple, most kind of a simplest possible uh, option. And what is that? What we're going to do, we are going to run SQL Server in a container locally and use um, Data API Builder on our local machine to access that data and expose that data as REST API and as GraphQL. And then, if time permits, I will show you an example of a static web apps running locally, things like that. Okay. So first of all, so let's start. So I have this command prompt available, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with first of all installing this tool. Just keep in mind that this tool is available. You have to first install it from through .NET Tool Install. And if in my case, since it's installed already, you will see a message that you have that is reinstalled with the latest version. If it's sometime that you install the tool and you run this command again, it will update the tool. Okay, so that's one thing. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is check the version just to make sure that we are able to run it, because so since so dab is the command line that we are going to be using. This is a CLI command line that does all the things. Okay, the next thing is we are going to pull the Docker SQL Server image. So this is the Docker pull. And since I already have the image, it doesn't do much. So the image is there now, everything is there. And now I am going to run the Docker image on my local machine. Okay. And this is the password. Since I'm running locally, I don't care about the password. So that's okay. So we are running it. Let's do a Docker PS to make sure that this thing is running. So now we have SQL Server running on our local machine. What we are going to do now is I have a SQL Server Management Studio. I hope everybody can see it. And I'm going to try to connect to that SQL Server engine. This is my SQL Server since it's running in a container local host, SQL Server authentication. I'm going to do the connect and it is connected. And right now there is no database. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in and create a um, uh, you know, create a very small database. So let me go there and let me get the script for that database. Any questions so far, folks? And let me create a new query. So it's gonna create a new query here. I'm gonna paste this. So what it's gonna do is it's gonna create a bookshelf database and just add some authors. Okay, just keep in mind the purpose of this demo is not to show you the all the complexity of static web apps and how they work with uh, data API builder. It's to show you like how this thing works, so you can, show you some of the feature. I mean, it has a lot of feature which will take probably more than 30 minutes. So that's why I just want to start with a very simple example. So let's run this. So what it has done is it has created a database. Let's refresh it here. The database is there, and we have our table. and this is my table, and I'm gonna do a refresh on this table, and sorry, tables, and then I'm gonna get select top 1000 rows. So this is the list of authors in my table. Okay, that's that. And then the next, I'm going to run the dab init command. So now we are getting into the uh, CLI. So first, a few things. Okay, um, let me show you my environment variables. So I have created, since I was doing some experimentation, just playing around with it. So I have created some environment variable, and it is a dab environment, and it's saying development. So basically, this is to test, like if you have playing with production and development, you can set one environment or the other, and based on that, you can load the settings for production versus development. I mean, you get an idea. This is what we do. So um, let's do that. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to, before I do that, let me open VS Code and let me show you what's going on in the VS Code. So right now, this folder is empty. There is nothing there. Yes, that's the code. And let's run this command and then see what happens here. Okay, so it has basically um, added a configuration file. Let's take a look. Okay. This is the configuration file. Since the environment was development, it has created dab config development.json. Okay, so that's why it created it. If you don't have the environment set up, it will just create a dab-config.json. Okay, um, so that's that. And now let's take a look. First of all, this stuff is pretty standard. You have database type is Microsoft SQL. You have connection string, and of course, you can provide, and we will add the connection string here in a second. And then you have the options like set session context is false, and then you have the runtime, which is it's enabling REST and GraphQL. Okay, the rest of the stuff is pretty uh, standard. It's like static web apps. I mean, boilerplate. And right now there are no entities. Just keep in mind, entities is empty. So let's now add an entity here, so we can go with it. So let's go in here, and I am going to add the entity, and let's take a look at this, what we are doing with adding this entity here. Okay, first we are saying add an entity author, and the source of the entity is the source of the entity is dbo.authors. Permissions anonymous, so anybody can access it. I told you it supports authentication. Right now, we are saying no authentication required. Everybody can access everything. Star means read, write, create, update. Basically, you have everything. You have all the access, all the CRUD access is at your disposal. Okay, so that's that. So now everything we are going to be allowing. So let's run it, and here we go. So now we have created this um, database, and created this set. So give me 1 second. Let me check one more thing here. Um, so any questions, first of all? Okay, okay, so what I'm going to do is the last thing is I'm going to set the connection string. Okay, so let's go into my config file and set the connection string. Okay, and I have and I can show it to you um, in my environment variables. I have this SQL Docker connection string set up. So let's save it. Now everything is set. We have the configuration file set up. We have dab installed. We have database running. So let's, the only thing to do is now tab start. Okay, so it's loading configuration file and it's gonna be bringing this thing up. Give it a second. It has loaded the entity author, um, and give it a second. And finally, it will show you the URL. So it shows you this is the HTTP, this is the HTTPS URL. Okay, so let's copy this URL. And what I'm going to do is I am going to paste this here, and I am first of all I'm going to do the Swagger. Okay. So by the way, yes, one thing I forgot to mention, it supports Swagger as well. So you have Swagger, you have OpenAI, and you have the GraphQL as well. Okay, so let's just do Swagger and let's get all the authors. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to try it out and I'm going to execute. Look, let me just increase the size a little bit, 20, so everybody can see it better. So all the authors. So look, the query is there, and I mean, if I want, I can just take this and I can do this query here. Okay, so as you can see, the query is here, and then I can do this query as well. You see, so basically, I'm kind of doing using the REST. And what about the OData? Yes, OData is fully supported. So if we wanna, let's say, wanna find out, um, wanna select only the last name and first names of the users. And I'm sure you are familiar with OData, but I just want to show it to you that this fully supports it. And by the way, while this is happening, I mean, look at this. It will show you how it is scoring the data behind the scene, what actual queries it is running behind the scene. So that give you so as you can see, you can as you are running it, you can see it what's happening behind the scene. And if you're running in a container, you can get this all these traces out if you want. And for example, one other thing, let's say I want to filter, find out the law based on the last name, who's on person's last name. So let's go in here. I want to find the author whose last name is Howard. That's it. Every Howard. Okay, that's good. So once that is done, let's see if we can create something. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in here and I am going to go to the post and I am going to add somebody. I'm going to say try it out and I'm going to do 100 and okay, that's that. And let me execute it. And let's see what the result is. Yes, it is successful. Just to prove out the point, we can go in here and we can do all the query about all the authors. Look, that author is here, 100. So you see what I'm saying? Everything is communicating without writing a single line of code. We are able to communicate with the database, get the queries, do select, create, all of that. Okay. Now, what about uh, the GraphQL? Okay, so let's do this. Let's copy this here, and now we're gonna do GraphQL. Folks, any questions? Yes, allow. And I'm gonna say browse schema. So this is the schema. It's loading the schema. Give it a second. Come on. Yes. So there are two queries, three mutations. Um, so let's do a query. Let's find a, um, you know, so what we're going to do is we're going to go into operations and I am going to do this. Authors, all the items by first name. And let's run it. You see, all the authors by first name. So that's kind of done. And let's do another query, find the author who is, and by the way, and the point is not to kind of how smart this editor is. Once again, this is a very simple query. This is finding the author uh, whose ID is 100. Let's run it. Yes, John 01. And how about a mutation? So let's run a mutation. Okay. So I am going to put this mutation here. And by the way, you understand, queries are mutation are when you are trying to change something in GraphQL. Okay. Oh, by the way, let's go back here in the um, in here, and as you can see, all as we are running queries, it is um, you know uh, uh, doing things on the database. So you can see all that stuff here as well. Okay. Um, with that, we can run it. So this will create the item. So let's quickly confirm it here. We are on this one. Let's uh, refresh this page. Yes, it has added an author of John 02. Okay. So now let's make a very simple configuration change in the config file. Okay. I'm going to go in here and I'm going to go in the config file. Right now, I'm saying anonymous, everything, everybody has access to everything. What I'm going to say is I am just saying read access. Okay. Let's save this file and I'm going to restart my runtime. Give it a second. In the meantime, any questions, folks?
So all the other due diligence like XSS filtering and SQL injection, those type of things, still we need to manage, right?
That's right, because it's an API.
Correct.
Normally, if
Instead
you're
of
doing an API, so you don't have to worry about SQL to some extent, SQL
running the
filtering, because
queries.
yeah, because you are not writing the queries. No? I mean, it
Right.
is yeah. So that's why APIs are a better front end than like writing your usual queries. Okay, so that's that. Okay, now let's go back to Swagger. We only allow read. So now we are going to add another item and we are going to call it 102 and this is 03 and let's run it. There we go, 403. Access not allowed, So basically that's how you are blocking access. One other thing I want to show it to you in GraphQL. Okay, so I'm going to refresh the schema. Remember, we were seeing queries and mutations when we had the star, like everything allowed. Okay, let me refresh this thing. Okay, let me just go into where are the schema reference? Yeah. Okay, where are the mutations? Don't see the mutations here. Why? Because mutations are only available when you have read write. Mutations are not available, they're write only. Okay. So that's why, so it removes the mutation. Got it? So we can still do the queries, but mutations are gone. So I mean, it's just some simple stuff. And let me just share this with you guys. This is the a more complex schema, and you can play around with it in 30 minutes. I didn't have time to go through everything. You have tables, you have relationships, you have stored procedures, you have linking of tables, you have table mapping. For example, here there is mapping of the field. So what you can do is, for example, you don't um, um, like last underscore name. You can do last name, capital. So you see, you can change your output. There are a lot of possibilities that you can do with this thing. Okay. Now, what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna quickly run this. Here, let's see. We have one more. Any question in the meantime? Okay. I was about to show you the. I think we don't have enough time for the static web apps, but just a quick recap. Um, Data API Builder is an open source project which provides you a hosting runtime plus a policy engine to expose your data sources through REST and or GraphQL. Okay, you can run it in a container locally on your own machine, in your own environment, in Azure, in another cloud, in AKS, or Azure Container Apps. Okay, it is the default engine that you use when you are using static web apps for data connection. So when you have a static web apps that are accessing data, relational data, that is the engine that is running behind the scene. Got it? So that's what we want, and it has a lot of flexibility. I have shared two links in the end of first is the documentation, then there are samples. And they are very extensive samples. You can take a look at it, and with this one, you can see the nth degree of customization here. For example, this is the reference of the command line reference, then the configuration reference, different sections, for example, entities, and then you have the mapping. So you can do full mapping. Look, field name alias, all of that. So everything is at your disposal. You wanna take it, you can enable authentication. So we can do probably a 2 hour session on this, which kind of out of scope of this discussion. So I know we are right on time. Please let me know if you have any questions. Okay. There are no questions. Thank you for joining, and hope everybody had a great weekend. Hope to see everybody next week for another session of Azure Powerline.
Yeah, thank you.